We want everybody to have an opportunity to participate as much as possible. So at first, I'd just like to provide a little overview, kind of where we've been in the past year and what some of our key efforts have been. And then Sara Langworthy is going to provide us with an overview of the efforts that have been ongoing with grant that they've been working on. So, okay. Sara.
Hello.
Yeah, I'm having, it says you have the controls.
Okay, I just sent the controls over to you, so hopefully. Are you able to use the arrow keys to advance the slides?
Nothing's happening. Okay, now it says I can do it. There we go. All right. Too much. So for those of you who are not familiar with the consortium or perhaps new to the consortium, we're a national organization that's composed primarily of university-based entities, mainly composed of centers or programs, departments. We have, although it is possible as an individual to join, the bulk of our members are groups who work together to promote child and family policy, very, very broadly defined. And one of the key characteristics of our group is that we are interdisciplinary, recognizing that in order to promote evidence-based policy, we need multiple disciplines to work together. So our members include people with expertise in anthropology, economics, human development, nursing and pediatrics, political science, psychology, public health, and sociology. I may be leaving somebody out because we are growing, and this pretty much represents what our current affiliates are. Okay, why is this not working? I think there must be a... Here we go. So we are organized really around three major sets of activities. We do conduct research as a group. One of the great things about this group is that as we share our ongoing research activities at each of our institutions, we have found that we have overlapping research interests, and that has facilitated collaborations across our institutions. Sarah's going to show a prime example of that later this afternoon. We also are very invested in mentoring and promoting cross-disciplinary efforts beginning at the undergraduate level and preparing the next generation of child and family policymakers and researchers, not only in settings but in policy settings. And you're going to learn about how we have connected with policymakers, a lot at the state level, which may be one of the other defining characteristics of our group. And then the third activity is engagement, and this is really translating research in an effective way to influence policy and practice, and to work really collaboratively with policymakers and key influencers at state level, so that we can effectively use evidence in a way to inform policymakers so that they make decisions based on research rather than just on opinion. Okay. What am I doing wrong here? Here we go. So we have really grown over the last 12 years. The consortium was founded in 2002, really with Deborah Phillips and Ken Dodge, among others, and there were a series of meetings in those first 5 years. In 2008, the administration moved to Duke, and there was a one-day-a-week director, Ginny Owens, and at that time the consortium coordinated efforts with SRCD with a gift from Ed Ziegler to have a pre-conference that focused just primarily on policy issues, and that partnership still exists today. In 2010, interest groups were formed. These special interest groups then met regularly with conference calls. We enhanced the website. There was a roundtable at APAM. And then, I'm so sorry about this delay here. It worked beautifully yesterday when we practiced, of course. And really the activities just really grew, including some partnerships with Division 37 of APA, a newsletter. We had our second pre-conference at SRCD, an early childhood working group. Our membership expanded, the steering committee expanded. And then really in 2013 and this past year, the WT Grant Award was funded for the child welfare program. We had an international series that was led by Dr. Joan Lombardi, and our third pre-conference at SRCD. And then this year we entered a memorandum of understanding with SRCD to move our administration from Duke to the SRCD Policy and Communications Office in Washington. And this took quite a while. It took a little over a year, really, to get that agreement made. And the reason that the steering committee pushed for this agreement is that we felt that, for one, it would give us a sustainable home for administration. Ginny Owens did a wonderful job, but that really just could not be her job. She has other responsibilities at Duke. And it also, I think, raises the visibility of the consortium because many of our activities are really geared towards state-level policy. It also provides some benefits, I think, to SRCD as an organization who heretofore most of their policy is in the Washington, D.C. area, led by Marty Zaslow and her team in D.C. Okay, we're going to try this one more time. Okay, so this is just a listing of the steering committee members. Our staffing is all part-time. They all have other responsibilities at SRCD. So Sara Langworthy is, well, now it's really going crazy, is our...
yeah. Forward it when it's slow for you, so...
Okay. Sara Langworthy is is a senior associate in the Office of Policy and Communications in D.C., and she's really our go-to person now. And then Marty Zaslow is our senior advisor, and Hannah Klein is our assistant. So they're doing a great job organizing everything for us now. Okay. So our webinars have been highly successful. You can see the range of topics that we've had in 2013 and 14, ranging from early learning and funding, and which is always a hot topic for everybody in these times, and evidence-based research and translating health research. And then we had an international child policy series that was led by Joan Lombardi, which was also highly successful, and she was able to pull in some really of the top players in this area. And it was a great experience, I think, particularly for early career folks to learn more about the opportunities in this area. Okay, so the topics that we have planned for the fall, we are continuing the international series that Joan has put together with international perspectives on home visiting. And in December, we have a really great webinar on child abuse and biological factors that go into that. And that's going to be moderated by Cheryl Boyce and Valerie Mahomes, both from NIH, and with presentations by Sarah Jaffe and Seth Pollack, which for those of you who know this work, this is really some very exciting work that's going on. Okay, so one of the things that I think really makes this consortium unique is that we encourage and indeed expect participation by people at all stages of their career and at all places of employment. So we have people participating, faculty, research scientists employed in a variety of, either think tanks or the government. We have graduate and undergraduate students are highly involved in the work that we do. Professional staff, including policy and communication specialists. We think it's really, really important to get the work out, get the research out, but in a way that's accessible to policymakers and the public and other staff of our member organizations. So everybody's involved in the work. Okay. We think particularly the consortium, the steering committee has made a strong commitment to making sure that the member centers have benefits for students. And I think that the most recent example I can think of is the webinar series that Joan Lombardi has been putting together, and she had two students work very closely with her in terms of organizing the webinar, and I think this was a fantastic experience for them. They got to know, some of the top people in the international field of policy and have made some wonderful connections. I think that will be great for their career, as well as we often have students assigned to different consortium projects and initiatives, and you don't have to be at the site, which has proven to be a really good experience, and people have gone on to either for the undergraduates gone on to graduate school, or for graduate students, it's really helped facilitate access to postdocs and other jobs. Okay. I think for faculty and research scientists, there have been some concrete examples of facilitating new research projects that we wouldn't have been able to do just at our own site, in terms of doing work across states, and I think Sarah's going to give us some good examples of that. I think it's also been a good place for mentoring other faculty members and research scientists. I know that we have developed a good network amongst ourselves, and that we have been able to call upon each other with questions, particularly in the policy world, about this is not always something that people were prepared for in their academic lives. And I think it provides a good resource to mentor others. And also, I think that talking about the challenges of being a policy researcher in an academic institution. This is not necessarily a path that has been clearly defined in the past, and it's good to have a cohort of people that you can talk to, talk about the challenges, talk about the ways to problem solve, and as well as some good solutions. And there's some really good people involved in the consortium that you can pick up the phone or start an email chain of how to deal with some of the challenges. And we do have a LinkedIn support for students and faculty so that they can get more policy-related information. Okay, next one. These are just some of the other benefits. We try to have a presence at some of the main conferences, including SRCD and APAM. Those are the primary ones. If you check out our website, you will see that we try to keep up to date with policy-relevant briefs. There is a guide to careers in child and family policy. We have syllabi posted, and then there's a conference call schedule and presentations from previous calls. If you're not already on the listserv, I encourage you to join. You will get updates in terms of what's going on in terms of the webinars, funding opportunities, position openings, and relevant events. We try to use it judiciously so you're not bombarded with emails, and that it has all relevant information. Occasionally there are internships available, so I encourage you to go to the website when you can. Okay. These are just some of our recent accomplishments. We will have another pre-conference at the 2015 SRCD meeting, and we're very excited about this. It's going to be on income inequality and child poverty, which is a very, very timely topic, unfortunately. I've already mentioned the International Child Policy Series. Sarah's going to talk about the WT grant that was received by some of the members. I mentioned already the SRCD agreement, and then the biennial Ziegler conferences. We've had meetups at conferences including APA and SRCD and APAM. We are expanding the steering committee, and we've had 2 interns working with the steering committee, and then we conducted a survey to assess research and professional interests. And so really what we are hoping to do and that we're working on right now, excuse me, is to increase our membership in a strategic way. We have initiated a quarterly newsletter. We have determined the importance of demand for career development services, and we're working on more of a mentoring plan. We have worked with the National Conference of State Legislators and National Governors Association, and we developed a proposal in conjunction with SRCD strategic plan. Unfortunately, that was not funded, but we're not giving up. And so we do have an initiative underway that's focused on early childhood and coordinating state-level databases across early childhood relevant information. We are enhancing the database of policy briefs that are authored by consortium members. So if you have briefs relevant to the consortium, please contact Sarah. We have created a lecture series to communicate to research and policy makers, and then the WT Grant Foundation project that I mentioned. So we are growing, and we grow in a way to meet the needs of the members. And I think that's pretty evident about what our current activities are. This is a list of our members. You can see we're relatively geographically diverse, and each one of these places, the one thing that pulls us together is that we all have active research or translation efforts ongoing in child and family policy. You can also see that listing on the website. So if you're not a member, think about joining. As I said, this is an institutional commitment, so talk to your powers that be in terms of finding the money for this. And if you're interested in becoming a student intern, you can contact Sara, and her email is up there, and you can find out pretty much all of this information is on our website, and that's the website address. So that is pretty much what I have to say. I don't know if there are any questions. I'm about ready to turn this over to Sara.
Yeah, I did everyone. So if anyone has any questions or comments, please feel free to type now before we hand the controls over to Sara Langworthy.
Well, why don't we go ahead and turn it over to Sara so she can tell us about the WT grant.
Sure, and Sara, I'm just sharing the controls with you right now.
All right. Okay. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on the call today, and thanks to the National Consortium group that asked me to talk a little bit about this work today. So as Barbara mentioned, there was a recent grant awarded to a group of National Consortium members, including Chapin Hall at the University of Chicago, Duke, the Center for Child and Family Policy, and then us here at the University of Minnesota Extension. And this work really centers around issues that surround the two systems of child welfare and education. So we know that there are a lot of complicated factors that are at play when we're talking about these two systems. They're traditionally very siloed and isolated. Kind of across the country, you see a lot of states sort of struggling with how to operate between these two different systems. And so a group of partners from the National Consortium got together and proposed a grant to the WT Grant Foundation. The WT Grant Foundation funds projects that really work to gather researchers, policymakers, and practitioners to talk about pressing issues related to policy and practice. And so as a result of this work, we were given some funds to convene some groups of practitioners and policymakers from 3 different states. So we have people from Minnesota, from Illinois, and from North Carolina who have participated in this group. This is a group shot of some of us at one of our 2 in-person meetings. So we had a series of conference calls leading up to the first meeting to really kind of flesh out what this group going to do and who are we, what's going to happen here. And then we met for the first time last fall, so about a year ago now, in Chicago. And it was interesting being a part of that meeting because none of us had really met each other before. So the day was really spent kind of warming up and learning about each other and really learning about the differences in our different states when it comes to some of these big issues surrounding child welfare and education systems. So what are some of these big issues? We're going to talk about a couple of them briefly today. These 3 issues are things that came up over and over and over again in our conversations. And the main 3 we'll talk about today are student mobility, data sharing, and collaboration among professionals. And actually we've got Angela Mendell and Kevin Walsh on the phone today who have agreed to talk a little bit about their experience in this group and some of the issues that they face in their respective states. So Angela, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk a little bit about student mobility.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Like she said, I'm Angela Mendell, and I work in a very small, well, geographically we're large, but we're very country, part of North Carolina, eastern North Carolina, and actually I'm a behavior specialist with the school system here. My background actually is in child welfare, and for many, many years I've been with the school system here for about 5 years. But as far as what we're seeing with mobility, the kids moving so often and so to so many areas is very concerning, mostly because a lot of our kids are needing a higher level of care than what a regular family foster home has, which is licensed through our Department of Social Services. So the higher level of cares would be a therapeutic foster home, which is through our mental health system. So the children are in the custody of the Department of Social Services, but they're being shuffled all over the state due to they need to be placed as not in their local areas. And that just really creates a lot of different problems because of the catchment areas that our managed care organization, which is how our mental health system is run, they may not even get the mental health services they area because they're tied to a different geographic area for their mental health services due to their Medicaid funding. So they're in placement in a therapeutic foster home needing all kinds of services but can't even get those. They show up at the school with the foster parent to enroll them because the social worker or the agency that has legal custody of them is 4 counties away, 2 or 3 hours away. And so then we have no one legally responsible for them enrolling them in school. It may be a month or two before we even get their educational records, and then we find out, oh gosh, these children receive exceptional children's services, which, we've put them in a huge disadvantage because we didn't have that information. Nobody told us that information, and they're in regular classes, falling even further behind. And a lot of this and then they're bounced around again. So a lot of that goes into, that's practice issues. Just frustrating practice issues that we're dealing with on a day-to-day basis for these children because the lack of communication is not there.
Great. Thanks, Angela, for chiming in about that. I think one of the really interesting things about being a part of this group was hearing the stories of different states and realizing there are a lot of similarities. So North Carolina and Minnesota share an organizational structure in that these are county-administered systems. So when you hear kids moving around a lot, it's often very difficult because you're working with different counties and different school districts with different rules and regulations for how things are carried out. So speaking from a Minnesota perspective, I think that was really interesting and helpful for us to learn that those kinds of things are happening in North Carolina as well, and to sort of think about strategies for how to improve that. Illinois, on the other hand, has a slightly different system for dealing with some of these issues, and I'd like to turn it now over to Kevin Walsh to talk a little bit about some of Illinois' work around data sharing.
Sure, thanks. My name is Kevin Walsh. I'm the Education and Transition Services Administrator for the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. And I was asked today to talk a little bit about what our efforts have been to improve our data around kids in foster care and their educational progress. Just a little background about Illinois. We are a state system under the state. We don't do a county-based system. We have one central office that manages the whole state. Illinois is kind of led the country in the fact that we extend foster care till 21, whereas a lot of other states are following in our footsteps currently and extending foster care till 21. We've done it for many years. We're really proud of some of the work that we've done around education policy for kids in foster care, which includes a developmental screening for all youth as they enter care between the ages of 0 and 3. We have a policy that requires all 3, 4, and 5-year-olds to be enrolled in early learning, Head Start, preschool for all programs. We have a policy that requires that educational progress is assessed. The educational progress of kids in foster care is assessed twice yearly as part of the case planning process. We extend kids who are in college can stay in the system with benefits until age 23. And for kids who have been dropped out or have poor academic progress, we have a program here with the Alternative School Network, which is part of the larger Youth Connection charter schools, to allow kids in foster care expedited enrollment. So we've set aside a lot of key policy and program areas to really assure the educational progress. But the reality is we have had a really difficult time telling that story from a data perspective. Another policy that we have is we try and match kids to foster homes at the time that they enter care so that they can remain in their home. Remain in their school, excuse me, that when they're removed from their biological family that they can stay in the same school, and that's a major priority with us. However, we have a real difficult time with educational data. Social workers are not typically really good at interfacing with school districts. And so a couple years ago, we approached our Illinois State Board of Education, who collects a series of educational data on every youth in the state of Illinois. And school districts under state law are required to report that data into the State Board of Ed, who then collects it all and has all this educational data about kids throughout the state. And in 2011, we began discussions with our Illinois State Board of Education about if we could engage with them about doing some matching. Could they tell us of who the kids, if we sent them our data, could they look at that data and send us back some educational data on our kids so we can begin to assess things like special education rates, graduation rates, kids who have dropped out, and specifically trying to look at some of these policies and programs we implemented and their effectiveness. After about 2 meetings with their lawyers and their chief performance officer, the door was quickly slammed in our face and say, no, FERPA doesn't allow us and we cannot share any data with you. And luckily, just about that time, rolling through the U.S. Department of Ed were some rulemaking changes. And in 2012, President Obama signed the Uninterrupted Scholars Act, which specifically amended the amended FERPA to allow child welfare agencies to obtain student records without parental consent. It recommended the elimination of the requirement that the parents receive notice from educational agencies regarding the release of PII, personally identifiable information. And it also recommended the definition of parent be changed so that under the Individual with Disabilities Education Act, a foster parent was now considered a foster parent. Some of those changes were adopted into the Uninterrupted Scholars Act. And in 2012, we were invited back by the Illinois State Board of Ed to reissue our intergovernmental agreement. And so where we stand today is, and we've been in negotiations with them, it took us about a year. In January 2013, we were able to successfully, a year later, sign an agreement with them where they are going to share data with us on all the youth in Illinois who are in foster care and under our custody and under the age of 18. What we plan to do with that data is a couple things. One, at the case level, we plan to populate it into every youth's electronic child welfare record, where caseworkers will have easy access to youth's educational history, their special ed status, their educational progress, their test scores, their report card score or grades. And then we also will then be able to look at that data as from system-wide to see how we're performing as a system and to kind of look at whether these policies that we've had in place for many years, do they make sense from the data perspective. We believe they do, and we hope that the data will support that. One of the reasons why we really are concerned about this is from some of the research that we do have. We know that a recent study from our Coming Out of Chapin Hall showed that a lot of the kids in Illinois, when they come into our care, are at least 2 grade levels behind. So a lot of times it's not the experience of being in foster care that's been, it's a lot of things that have happened prior to their entry into our system. So we're interested in looking at that a little bit more and how we can do some more front end from the policy and practice, get kids ready and bring them up to speed so they have more success in school. And the other thing is a lot of the research that we have about kids in Illinois is just from samples, small groups. And we're really interested here in Illinois in looking at all our kids and how they're doing throughout the state compared against school district to school districts. And also we're really interested in performance-based contracting here. About 80% of our cases are privatized, so we're interested in looking at how our agencies fare with serving our kids and making that part of their performance measure. So that's a little bit about our landscape and a little bit about our educational data. It's been a long road to get the data, but we believe it'll be coming in real soon. But it's been a challenge, and we're hoping that other states will follow so we can look at this kind of nationally about kids in foster care.
Great, Kevin. Thank you very much for sharing a little bit about what Illinois has been up to over the past few years. It sounds like there's been a lot of forward momentum around some of the important data questions. One of the things that was really apparent when we all met as a group of different practitioners and policymakers and researchers from these different states. We all kind of work at different levels of these systems, and it became very, very clear that there were often issues with collaboration across these systems. So at the state level, as Kevin already talked about, sometimes working at the state level trying to get things moving, you get doors slammed in your face. And as Angela mentioned, working on a practice level in a local community, sometimes it's hard to get responses back on information that you need about students who are moving into your district. So one of the things that we've done here in Minnesota, the Minnesota team got together and said, well, we know there are these barriers to collaboration, but we don't really know exactly what they are in Minnesota. What are the things that are causing the most problematic issues when it comes to trying to get information across these two systems, trying to really make these systems work together the best ways that they can. So what we did is we did a brief survey that we sent out to professionals across the state of Minnesota to ask them a little bit about what barriers they experience in their work when they're trying to collaborate with the other systems. So we asked people who work primarily in the education system as well as people who work primarily in the child welfare side of things to weigh in on what are these barriers and what are the factors that are really important for collaboration. I've got a couple links here on the screen. One is to our written report that outlines the findings from that survey in detail, and then the second is a video that we did, about a 12-minute video that kind of walks through some of the findings from the survey as well. So if you're interested in diving into some of those issues a little bit more, I encourage you to check those out. As a result of some of what we've found, and I'll give you a little teaser, which is to say that one of the main things we found in Minnesota is that actually people in the metropolitan areas tend to experience a higher number of barriers than people who work in more rural areas of the state. And so we really kind of want to delve into that and figure out what is it that works well in more rural areas. Is it just that in rural areas there's one person to call when you're calling the county, and in metropolitan areas you're dealing with a lot more, possible people that you would have to contact to get the information that you need, or is it more complex than that? So this fall, our group is hosting a series of focus groups across the state of Minnesota to get at these kinds of issues a little bit more in detail, and to get practitioners and professionals to weigh in more on what their creative strategies are for building more successful collaborations across these two systems, what strategies they use on a daily basis to get the work done in the best way that they can, as well as what recommendations they have for building better systems. What things in their daily work come up that might be really informative to the system at large, and how we understand how those systems operate. So stay tuned for those results. We're in the process of getting all of that done this fall. As for the larger group project, we've got a few different directions that we're working on right now. So the WT grant funding was solely for these 2 in-person meetings that we had and to support the conference calls and the sort of networking pieces of the project. But we wanted to take it a step further because in the group we recognize that there are a variety of different expertises that we wanted to showcase and bring to the table, and that because we all come from different states who are facing a lot of the same and also some very unique challenges with respect to child welfare and education systems, we want to come up with some sort of what we're calling right now a project deliverable, some sort of report or policy recommendations or educational training of some sort that really exemplifies the expertise that this group has. And so we're in the process of kind of figuring out what that might look like and what really needs to be represented there. Obviously, some of the issues that we discussed today on the call are big themes that come across not just in these states but across the country. And so are there pieces of these conversations that we've had that we can really highlight and bring to the table on a more national level when it comes to these 2 areas of child welfare and education? The other thing that we are hoping to do in the future is to continue and expand this collaboration. So I will speak for the group here, and I know there are others on the call today, other group members. So please chime in if you would like to about this whole process. But I think it's been a really wonderful learning experience for everybody. And a camaraderie builder. We've really gotten the opportunity to recognize the strengths of each of our individual states and also learn about the strengths of other states. And so we want to figure out how to expand that more nationally. So I know we've got a lot of people on this call today from a lot of different walks of life and different states across the country. So we really need your help. So I put a little link here to a brief survey that I'm just curious what your thoughts are on what ways we could expand this collaboration, within the national consortium or with some partnership with SRCD, or what other ideas you might have, as well as if we are creating a deliverable in your work, what kinds of deliverables would be most useful to you? Is it something you can take to your legislator when you go and meet them? Is it something that you can take to a group of professionals you're working with around child welfare issues? What are those things that would be helpful information to have? So if you have a few minutes, we would love your input, and that survey link is there. That's all I have at this point. I've got a lot of different links and everything here, so feel free to check out any of these things. We've got a project summary and the Minnesota Survey Report and video are there, as well as the survey for you to give your own voice and input into this. And I am open for any questions now, or if you want to contact me later, there's my email as well. So Sarah, I will turn it over to you to kind of field any questions or moving forward.
Yeah, well, I've unmuted everyone, but I know a lot of people are on self-mute as well. So if anyone in the group has any questions, you can either raise them by voicing them, or you can type them into the chat function. And I see one question from Marty in the chat. Has it proven difficult for caseworkers to read and understand educational records data when they have access to it? And how are they using the data so far?
I don't have a great answer to that question, so if any of the other group members who are on the call want to weigh in on that, Kevin or Angela, I see Anita is also here with us today. Any of you have some insights on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we, caseworkers sometimes have difficulty with test scores and the meaning of test scores. We also experience a lot of difficulties with caseworkers understanding special education disabilities and the special education laws. A lot of those tend to be some of the more challenging areas of education, but in general, overall performance, grade level, school attendance, the caseworkers seem to do a pretty good job with that and can make assessments. But special ed and test scores seem to be a problem area, and we've tried to do a lot of training around that, but that would be my feedback on that.
This is Angela, and while we're not at the level of sharing data at a state level or anything that Kevin's group is, on a local level, just in interacting with the caseworkers or social workers that are working with these children, primarily my focus is within the exceptional children's special ed programs, and they have a really, really hard time understanding that because it is just a tremendous amount of paperwork, and they're in, what is their classification? I don't understand that. Are they in regular classes receiving resources and things like that? So it just goes back to building relationships, communicating with them, and educating them, as well as them educating the school on what their job entails.
I see a question here in the chat about how these states were selected and plans to include more states in the future. Yeah, so the 3 states were chosen primarily because those were the original partners. And actually 2 of the 3 original partners have moved on. But Jenny Owen, who Barbara mentioned earlier, is the team leader in North Carolina, and then Cheryl Smithgall from Chapin Hall, and then myself here at the University of Minnesota. We initially had some conversations about including other states, but felt that to really pilot this effectively, given the leadership kind of capacity that the 3 of us had and sort of where we were, that it made sense to just include those 3 states as an initial kind of trial period for this. As for including more states in the future, would love to, and that's really where I think we want to think about how to grow this in a bigger way, and whether that requires funding or not. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like. We're still in the very early stages of that. But as I said, if you have ideas for that and what would be useful to you where you are, please share that via that link I shared earlier. Any other questions from anybody about either the issues we've discussed today, or I see a question from Hannah. Okay. You have a great question there, Hannah. So in the handout that we've shared, we discussed the cultural factors to consider and how will we include those factors in the dissemination product development. As I said, we're kind of in very early stages, and a lot of this will depend not only on our own internal capacity but funding. So you asked about things like disseminating in multiple languages, multiple forms, those sorts of things. I think we're really excited about the idea of disseminating in multiple forms. We've talked a lot about video. We've talked a lot about building an online community of some sort, and whether that becomes more of a resource sharing or a blog or a LinkedIn community to allow for some conversation around these topics. We're still kind of thinking about what that might look like. As for disseminating in multiple languages, I think that would be wonderful, and I hope that we are able to do that. And as for including or as considering cultural factors, I mean, it's an important conversation that, as I said, we're still kind of in the early development stage of these sorts of things. So that will be something we will definitely need to consider. Sarah, shall I turn it back over to you at this point?
Sure. I think Barbara was going to have a few closing words, and then if Caitlin or Kyle would like to say a few things, I'm actually going to share my screen. Give me a moment here, because I want to put up the information on our next few consortium calls.
Great. Well, I just want to thank everybody for taking the time out today, and Sarah, thank you and your team for a really excellent presentation. It was really very interesting, and I think it's a really good example of how this consortium can act as a catalyst for some very interesting research, and also it's a good way to sort of share these stories and these experiences of working in these areas that sometimes can be sort of landmines, and people are sort of groundbreakers in trying to do some of this, really important policy work, but sometimes it's also very difficult. So Sara has put up our next webinars. The next one's November 3rd with the continuing series on international perspectives, and then December 2nd is the vetting of child abuse led by Cheryl Boyce and Valerie Mahomes. So I just want to thank you again for taking the time out today, and hope to have you all back on November 3rd, and please spread the word. Anything else, Sara?
No, I think that's it. Thanks so much for leading the call,
Okay.
Barbara.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.